I'm going to talk about the three phases of digestion and the control over digestion. There's three phases. There is the cephalic phase of digestion, which is going to be involving the cephalic brain, the cerebral cortex, and the brainstem. We're not going to be too concerned about the exact details there, but just involving the CNS, central nervous system. The next phase is the gastric phase of digestion, which is going to be involving the stomach, and then we have the intestinal phase of digestion, which is going to be involving the intestine. The purpose of all of this control is to regulate the movement of food through the GI tract from the point of entry in the oral cavity to the exit out the anus. So the food has to move along at an appropriate rate, not too fast, not too slow. You want it to go slow enough so that nutrients can be digested and absorbed. Okay, and you want to control the movement from one segment of the digestive system to the next so that it is not getting overwhelmed and the digestive system can move things along at an appropriate rate. The other aspect that's being controlled is the secretion of a variety of enzymes to aid in digestion. And again, you want to be able to regulate that depending on what is in the digestive system and how much is in the digestive system. So we're going to look at each one of these, and if you can refer to the chart that I gave you to go along with this, I will be discussing the stimulus and the response for each of these different types of control. So let's start with the cephalic phase of digestion, and as discussed, this is going to be involving the cerebral cortex and also involving the brainstem. In short, it's going to be involving the central nervous system or the cephalic brain. So, as mentioned, this is a feed-forward response. Now, why it's called feed-forward is that it's going to be preparing the GI tract for the entry of food into the system. So, for example, here's the turkey. It smells good, it looks good, and your brain is now going to prepare your digestive system for the food that is hopefully coming to it. So, let's just take a look at what the stimulus is. The stimulus coming in, as already mentioned, is the smell, the sight, the thought, or perhaps just the initial taste of food. Now, no food has actually entered the GI tract yet, and the response is going to be twofold. First of all, you're going to have the salivary glands starting to secrete saliva to prepare for digestion of carbohydrates and a little bit of fat. And then we're also going to be stimulating the stomach, and this is going to increase the secretion of gastric juice from the gastric glands within the nervous system. And as mentioned now, this is going to be the CNS controlling it, but it will be the PNS that is sending out these messages. And in particular, it will be the parasympathetic nervous system, and it will be the vagus nerve that is stimulating these gastric glands. So, cephalic phase in preparation, feed forward, going to both the salivary glands and the stomach to increase secretions that are going to be necessary to digest the incoming food. Next is the gastric phase of digestion, and there are a variety of components associated with this, but just take a look that all of these are going to be involving the stomach. So the first one we're going to look at is number 2, and that is the enteric nervous system reflex. Now note here that the stomach is involved in the stimulus, so the stomach is going to be sensing and sending out an afferent message, and the response is also going to be the stomach. So this is within the enteric nervous system itself. So no information now is going to the cerebral cortex, and this is going to be what's known as a short reflex. So the stimulus within the stomach is the distension of the stomach. So there's going to be stretch receptors in the stomach that are responding to the volume of food in the stomach, causing these mechanoreceptors to send a signal, an outgoing efferent signal that's going to be integrated within the enteric nervous system. And also, if you increase the pH of the chyme inside the stomach, noting that the stomach is relatively acidic, so if you increase the pH, that means it's becoming more basic, and that's because the proteins are buffering. So essentially, increasing the volume of food in the stomach distends it, and having proteins is going to be detected by the change in pH, and these are going to be chemoreceptors responding to this. The response, twofold. First of all, there is going to be mixing waves, so this is going to cause churning, which is going to mix the food up in the stomach to aid in mechanical digestion. And again, we're going to have a secretion of gastric juice from the gastric glands. Noting that the stomach is the first place to digest proteins. So the fact that we are secreting this gastric juice aids in the digestion of proteins, and note that the stimulus for this was an indication that proteins were actually in the stomach. So the enteric nervous system, a local response, being stimulated by the proteins, and the response is to increase the digestion of the proteins. And in addition, you have those mixing waves to make sure that everything is getting mechanically processed and mixed up with the digestive enzymes. Number 3 is also in the gastric phase of digestion, and this is the gastroileal reflex. Noting in red here that it's going gastro, so it's coming from the stomach. Ileal is that it's going to the ileum. Note here that this is not a short reflex. This is also involving the CNS, in particular the brainstem. And so information, the afferent signals are being sent to the brainstem, and then efferent signals are going back to the ileum. The stimulus for this response is similar to the previous enteric system food reflex in that it is the distension of the stomach. So once again, food is in the stomach, the stretch receptors are going to respond. This, however, now is going to go ahead and prepare the ileum for the food that is coming its way. And what's going to happen here is twofold. First of all, you are going to stimulate peristaltic waves in the small intestine. So there is going to be a movement of food out of the intestine in preparation for the food that's going to be coming in from the stomach. The other response is relaxation of this ileocecal valve, and the relaxation is indicated by the dashed line. So there's a valve here controlling the movement of food from the ileum into the cecum. If we are going to stimulate peristalsis, we want to relax this valve so that food can then move in to the large intestine. So the gastroileal reflex is about motility. It's about moving food on because signals from the stomach are indicating that there is food moving towards the small intestines. The next reflex involved with the gastric phase of digestion is going to be number 4, coming from the stomach, again being mediated and integrated in the CNS, in the brainstem, is then going to be sending efferent signals to the colon. So the gastrocolic reflex is going to be, again, preparing the distal parts of the GI tract for incoming food. So what's happening here is the stomach is going to be stimulating mass peristalsis in the colon for defecation. Similar to the previous reflex, the stomach is saying there is food coming in. Okay, first of all, the ileum is going to send it to the cecum, and now the colon is going to prepare to get rid of the food through defecation. So both of these responses, the gastroileal and the gastrocolic reflexes, are affecting motility to make sure that food is moving on to make way for the food that is coming via the stomach. So far, these reflexes have been mediated by the nervous system, either number 2, which is the enteric nervous system, or the other ones which have been looking at the CNS for long reflexes. The final one, the enteroendocrine regulation. Entero, like enteric, okay, endocrine, the endocrine system, but it's coming from within the digestive system itself. So it's not from one of the other endocrine glands that we've looked at. The stomach itself is acting as an endocrine gland. The hormone that's mediating this response is called gastrin, and it's being released from G cells, remembering that the stomach has those gastric pits, and within those pits are different types of cells, one of which are these G cells releasing the hormone gastrin. Again, the stimulus for the release of this is going to be the distension of the stomach. So this, again, that distension of the stomach has triggered all of these reflexes. And the other stimulus is partially digested proteins, remembering that protein digestion begins in the stomach and that there will have been smaller peptides formed from those enzymatic reactions. So that, again, 2 stimuli. The response is going to be the increased release of gastric juice from gastric glands. And this is what I'm basically indicating right here, is that the gastrin goes back to the stomach and increases gastric secretions, once again for digestion of, particularly for proteins. It is going to contract the lower esophageal sphincter. So that is going to be the sphincter right here. The reason being is that you do not want food going back into the esophagus. You do not want reflux. The gastrin is also affecting motility in that is going to increase peristaltic contractions in the stomach. You're going to get mixing and propulsion to promote gastric emptying. So you're mixing the food, plus you want to promote the food, or at this point now it's called the chyme, if you remember that. Okay. It's going to be promoting the emptying of this chyme into the small intestine. In order to do so, you must relax the pyloric sphincter, and again that's indicated with a dashed line. So you block the backward or the retro movement of a chyme, and you promote the forward propulsion of food out of the stomach into the small intestine. Next, let's look at the intestinal phase of digestion. Now the stomach was sending and communicating with the ileum and the colon saying there's food coming, prepare yourself, but now the intestine, the duodenum, is going to be sending messages back to the stomach. So this is going backwards now. All of the other responses were going ahead, trying to prepare the distal parts of the intestine for incoming food. What's going on here is that if you have distension of the small intestine, it is going to then go back, and again the dashed lines, it's going to inhibit gastric motility. So if there's so much food in the small intestine that it can't handle anymore, it's going to tell the stomach, stop sending food my way, decrease gastric motility. So it's rather interesting that there's two-way communication between the stomach and the intestine. The final regulatory mechanism that we're looking at here is called the enteroendocrine regulation. Again, enteroendocrine having to do with local release of hormones from the gastrointestinal tract, and this is involving the hormone called CCK, which is cholecystokinin, but you don't need to really concern yourself with that. Okay, it's just called CCK. So this is being released from the small intestine, and the goal here is to increase secretions to aid in digestion. We're controlling motility, but we also want to control digestion. So the presence of amino acids or fatty acids in the small intestine are going to increase the secretion of enzymes from the pancreas. Remember, the pancreas empties into the duodenum. So we have amino acids, fatty acids. We want to increase the digestion. So we're going to increase the pancreatic juice, which contains the digestive enzymes. Okay, the presence of fatty acids is also then going to stimulate CCK to release bile from the gallbladder, and as we've discussed before, the bile salts from the bile is going to be essential in transporting these fatty acids in the form of micelles. So, overall, 3 phases of digestion: controlling motility and controlling secretions, which control digestion, making sure that food moves along the digestive tract at an appropriate rate, and that it doesn't get overloaded, and that the appropriate enzymes are being released depending on what type of food is in the digestive system. So I hope you can appreciate how complicated the digestive system is. It's involving short reflexes, long reflexes, nervous reflexes, hormonal reflexes. There is talking back and forth from different parts of the GI tract, controlling motility and controlling secretions and digestion.